What is the true nature of Celie's relationship with Shug Avery? What are my thoughts about the new film? And should we feel sorry for millionaires who complain about unequal pay? We're gonna discuss all of that and more right now. What's good, y'all? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Auziahtv and I'm a storyteller. Whether it's the novel written by Alice Walker, the 1985 film directed by Steven Spielberg, or the latest film directed by Blitz Bazawule, based on the Broadway musical, The Color Purple at its core is a coming-of-age story about a poor Black girl living in the South during Jim Crow and how she navigates abuse, loneliness, love, and ultimately peace. Now, y'all know how I feel about remakes. We talked about it before in my Little Mermaid review. Typically not a fan, and unfortunately that's also true for this movie. Now, it definitely wasn't awful and there were some amazing performances. I'll get to that later, but it just didn't feel like something that I would ever need to watch again. The argument for remakes just don't hold up for me. People say, well, what about the new generation? They need their own version of it. And in some cases, I do understand. There's new technology, new techniques. There's more we can do visually. However, it should be a rule, and I'm willing to die on this hill. If the remake can't be done better than the original, better being expanding more on important themes or eliminating less important themes or contributing something so new that it now feels like a new story. If it can't do any of that, then it shouldn't be made. Just my opinion. This is just my opinion. From strictly a story perspective, we did not need this movie. And yes, of course, I realize this is a musical, so there's nuance when we talk about purpose. In fact, I'm absolutely positive that the soundtrack will receive more awards. But film as a medium should be about story first. This version pretty much relies on the audience already seeing the 1985 film because of how quickly it speeds through character building moments to make room for the music. For example, the 1985 film takes a lot more time with Shug Avery's estranged relationship with her father, which of course gives her character some layers. She's not just some loose woman of the night, she has real feelings, and it can be reasonably inferred that her promiscuous past has a lot to do with trying to fill an absence in her life after being rejected by her father for wanting to be a blues singer. But in the new film, that entire storyline is summed up in about 45 seconds. Now, to be fair, the novel doesn't address that relationship at all, so it was always an addition to the story. But because Blitz made an attempt to address it, I needed more. I also didn't love how the movie addressed Shug and Celie's relationship. There just wasn't enough space, enough intention behind making their love story seem believable. It seemed like they just tried to cram it all in one scene, and then it never came back up again. And let's talk about their relationship for a second, because there is a lot of online discourse. There are people who are outraged. Why y'all gotta make everything gay? And these characters were never gay. I don't know what version of The Color Purple y'all have read or seen, but Alice Walker is a queer author, so that does show up in her work. In fact, if you read the novel, we find out that Celie is queer very early on. She talks about being in church and getting in trouble for looking at a boy because that's what her dad thinks she's doing, but actually she's looking at women. And she talks about how it's easier for her to fantasize about women because women don't scare her like men do. You know, her sexuality may be rooted in trauma, and I will leave y'all to decide whether or not that's problematic. But the point is, Celie is a queer character. She always was. So is Shug. In the book, they have a sexual relationship. These were always those characters. They treated that scene with Cely and Shug very differently in the 1985 film. It had everything to do, of course, with the time that it was. And, you know, you just weren't gonna show a whole full-on lesbian relationship in a film with predominantly Black people. You just didn't do that anywhere, especially in 1985. I remember Celie feeling almost childlike, almost like a little girl looking up at her mom or something. And it was more about the first time she would ever actually feel loved by someone that wasn't her sister. And then, of course, as it goes on, one of those kisses start to feel a little bit more seductive, but they don't really force a relationship in the 1985 version. It's kind of left up to interpretation, which I think was very intentional and actually quite wise for the time period that the film came out. In the new film, it's way more intentional. We see them pretty much go on a date and kind of court each other. They wake up in the bed together. So it kind of traces back to the roots of the novel, not so graphically, right? The new film kind of hints at that, but only a little. Though the film does take a more specific stance on their relationship, it feels less interesting. Maybe because they're singing about it. And so I have to just completely accept this love story that was only presented in one song. It just feels a little unfair to Fantasia and Taraji because so much of this story has to do with the relationship between these two characters. And it doesn't seem like they were given a solid screenplay which would give them time to appropriately explore the emotional range of these characters. Something I have no doubt they're capable of as actresses. And unfortunately, I think what I'm speaking to is something that comes when you take a story that wasn't originally a musical and you try to force it to be one. I don't know of a way of doing that without the story suffering at least a little bit. It just creates a pacing issue. You know, when you go to the theater, you know that they're limited. You know there's only so much they can do on a stage. And so you forgive pacing and quick transitions and things. But it's harder, at least for me, to forgive on the big screen. Now, there are plenty of good things to say about this movie, but before I get into all of that, if you're still here and you enjoy my content, please take a moment to like, comment, subscribe. I definitely want to know your thoughts on this movie. And of course, it's totally fine to disagree with me. All I ask is that you keep it respectful. All right. These women did a phenomenal job. I expect nominations. Play with me if you want to. I'm still very upset about the Black actresses who were snubbed last year, and I'm praying that this year they get it right. I thought the men did an excellent job as well, especially Carmen Domingo as Mr. So I'm definitely expecting some nominations there as well. I do have to say this, and it's not really his fault. Kind of hard to believe David Alan Grier as the pastor. All I saw was In Living Color, and I just couldn't really get past it. Same thing with Sierra. She didn't do anything wrong. She wasn't even in the movie long enough to do anything wrong. It was just a little distracting. Rock it, don't stop it. Everybody get on the floor. Take the party up. We about to get in. That was me in the theater, actually.
Sierra!
That's my husband in the background. Overall, I think the movie was beautifully shot. The cinematography was on point, as well as the costume department, especially when it comes to Shug Avery. She felt more glamorous and more mysterious in this movie, which I do think was Alice Walker's original intention. And then, of course, the music, right? There's not much I need to say here. Fantasia was definitely in her bag. I was so impressed with how she was able to not just be Fantasia straight out the gate with her voice, but she was Celie, the way she was able to use control when the story called for it and use power when the story called for it. I love Danielle Brooks as Sophia, and the song selections really allowed her to add some comedy to that character, yet she was still able to be so dynamic. And look, Taraji been that girl, okay? Singing, acting, always working, always perfecting her craft. And let me say this, she has been trying to tell us for years that she's not making any money in this industry and that Black actresses as a whole aren't making any money in this industry.
Right.
Okay, so let me break it down because I remember some people were like, 150, she greedy, that's a lot of money. Let me break this down for you. When you start making that kind of money, Uncle Sam takes 50%. So that leaves me with 75 now, right?
Yes.
I have to pay another 30% to my team who did all the work to get me that job.
Yes.
I don't pay them 30% of the 75. No. I pay them 30% of the 150 that comes out of my 75. You have 12 months in a year to make your money, right? If you do a film for 5 months, that takes you off the market for anything else to earn any other kind of coin.
I'm just tired of working.
so hard, being gracious at what I do, getting paid a fraction of the cost. I'm tired of hearing my sisters say the same thing over and over. You get tired. I hear people go, you work a lot. Well, have to. The math ain't mathing.
It's racism, it's misogyny, and unfortunately, it's a disconnect because the average American makes less than $50,000 a year. To those people who question, why should we care about you who, when I look up your net worth, you're a millionaire, why should I care when I can hardly feed my family, when I'm living paycheck to paycheck? Once you realize that what she's fighting for is much more than just money for herself. That what she's actually fighting for is the dismantling of systems that say the Black dollar, the Black identity, the Black experience is worthless. All the people that are saying they don't understand what Taraji is talking about, find out what your white coworkers are making. You know, the ones that started 3 years after you but got promoted above you. Like, find out what your coworkers who are not people of color are making. Report back. Come back here and report it in the comments. All of a sudden, a lot of things that she's talking about is gonna make a lot of sense. Final thoughts on the movie. I didn't love the redemption story that they gave Mr. It was actually kind of triggering. I'm sure it is some commentary on Black culture, Black families, how you really can pop up at a family function and boom, there's the uncle that tried to rape you when you were a kid, or there's the cousin that you secretly know is a child molester. There's the nephew that's a woman beater. Like, we are very forgiving, and oftentimes it is to our detriment. Mr. could do all this terrible stuff to Celie, and in the end, he gets an invitation to Easter dinner or whatever. I don't know. It just didn't feel good. And I'm also sensitive to domestic violence, so I'm sure that had a lot to do with my discomfort. And the whole time I was thinking, why did we need to write it to where now they're friends in the end? Why couldn't it be, you know, he figures out how to get Nettie back and he stays away, which is how we should treat abusers. But then of course I read the book and I find out that's exactly what happens in the book. By the end of it, Celie has completely forgiven Mr. They become friends, and he even proposes to her again. He wants to be her husband again, and she's like, no, let's just be friends. If there is anything that is just drastically wrong about this story, it is that. I don't believe that we should be sending a message out to the world that abusers are to be forgiven in this way. I don't know if that's something that I need to heal within myself, but I don't know. Y'all let me know how you feel in the comments. I appreciate that there has been this push to hire Black directors to tell Black stories. This was a huge issue back in 1985 when the first film came out. Even Whoopi Goldberg was like, it doesn't matter that Steven Spielberg is white. It should just be whoever is best to tell the story. Well, I happen to believe the person who's best to tell the story is the person who is closer to the story. I think Denzel Washington said it best. Take a listen.
Why did he need a Black director? Could a white director not have?
It's not color, it's culture.
Explain the difference, because I think we're
Steven
in a space
Spielberg
right
did Schindler's List. Martin Scorsese did Goodfellas, right? Steven Spielberg could direct Goodfellas. Martin Scorsese probably could have done a good job with Schindler's List, but they're cultural differences. You know, I know, you know, we all know what it is when a hot comb hits your hair on a Sunday morning, what it smells like. That's a cultural difference, not just a color difference. So it's a culture.
Shout out to my sister Sheree for sending me that clip. Thank you. I really agree with Denzel Washington on this one. All right, you guys, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and if there's nothing else, I will see you next time. Be blessed.